Hi, everyone. So no matter how many times I'm here presenting, I'm always nervous. So it gets better towards the end, so bear with me for a while. I want to talk today with you about learning from our mistakes. If the presentation is on the screen. Yeah, good. So learning from mistakes. I want to highlight to you some of the biggest learnings we had from Rovio from our bigger mistakes that we've made in the past. So slightly different take on the presentation. So let's start with the sequence number one. So of course, you guys said you know Angry Birds, you played it. Maybe some of you don't realize how big of a thing Angry Birds was. So we were #1 mobile company in the world for a couple of years. So we had, in terms of numbers, it's probably the most downloaded game ever. We have over 4 billion downloads across our games, right? We have a very strong brand awareness as well. So if you ask people around on the streets and wherever you go, up to over 90% of respondents, we answer to you that they know Angry Birds, right? We made some bold moves as well. So we released a Hollywood animation movie last year, and that was the very first animation movie made out a mobile game ever, right? But it was not always like that. The history of Rovio started with a very humble beginnings, as many other companies before. It was a students project that a couple of guys decided to start working together. And they had some sponsoring, some programs they joined from Nokia. So Nokia, I mean, Rovio is a Finnish company. Nokia is a Finnish. Okay. I remember that, right? So the fact is that the very beginning of the mobile gaming industry in 1998, if memory serves, was a few meters away from where Rovio is today, right? The industry was born there, and Rovio was very, very small in that beginning. Did a lot of work-for-hire projects, a lot of sponsored projects as well, and many of those games were not exactly a hit. So who knows the answer to that question here? How many games? Close, 51, actually. Yeah, not all of them, let's say, a big hit. And the situation was actually not very easy. At some point, it was all in for Rovio. So money was running short. The team were wondering what was going to happen next until this happened, right? And what we took away from that is, first of all, I'm not going to preach here that there is an easy way, made up formula to reach success. We were really lucky back then. That's the truth. So, of course, the game is excellent, very approachable. The tutorial of that game, the F2E, was just one image. Imagine that. You could start playing that game only seeing one image of how to play it. It was very instinctive how to play it. But also, so the game was super approachable. The characters were likable. It was not like a niche game. But most of all, the game was released at the right time. So it was when iPhone was released, the touch screen, people didn't really know how to use that yet. And that game taught many people how to use their devices, right? So it spread because of that. So if you want to succeed, first of all, bear in mind that you probably need to be lucky as well. But you can increase your chances of succeeding by having many bets. And that's, in a way, that's what Rovio did, right? They tried many times before they actually reached that success. And that's something that we still do nowadays. So we kill a lot of games in the last years. We killed a lot of games in development, some in soft launch. And we start them. We try to fail as fast as we can. And we think it's always best to try to have many games and many bets than one single big bet. And that's a big mistake that many people make when they're starting, including myself. Jeff will remember that our very first game was an MMO. We were out of school, a bunch of 5 people, and we decided to make the first MMO in Brazil. Well, you can imagine the result. The other takeaway is it can take time, so don't rush to success. It can happen in your first attempt, but more likely than ever, it's going to take a while. So the team and the founders needed to be emotionally prepared and financially prepared for a very long run. And that's something that always helps. So that's a short one. I'm going to skip to the second part and talk again about like Angry Birds, of course, and how big Rovio was the #1 mobile developer for a couple of years. Angry Birds 1 it still holds the record of the game that stayed longest as the #1 grossing game in the world, almost 2 years, right? And we have up to 97% brand awareness. 4 billion downloads. And as you can imagine, those were very good times at Rovio. We grew to 900 people. Right? Imagine that. I was still not there back then, but I remember people saying that, I don't know, this month we have like 10 new people in our team. Right? It was a very rapid growth, and we diversified a lot. We started doing a lot of different activities. We had animation studios, we had people making comic books in-house, books for kids, theme parks, CDs and DVDs, you name it, a lot of different consumer products. And some of those products we licensed, but some of those we actually manufactured them. We had the people doing this and this skill in-house to manufacture products, to distribute the products, and to sell them as well, right? So, but of course, then you need 900 people to do it. But behind the scenes, something was happening in the market, right? And 2009, Apple was the first one to enable in-app purchase inside the games, and eventually that got traction, and in 2011, there was a free-to-play boom. And the market shift completely. So what happened is, around 2011, mobile games became free of charge. 95% of the players don't pay. They don't want to pay anymore, and 99% of the revenue in the App Store are coming from free games. All right? So Rovio was super slow to react to that. Our first attempts to make free-to-play games were really half-hearted. So we were afraid of charging for like energy or lives inside the games. One of our first RPG games was a free-to-play game. We decided not to have an energy system because we thought that was too much to ask for the players. It was too harsh. And we also continued focused in having a lot of support from the platform owners like Google and Apple. And with that approach that we made the game and we prepared a huge release, we were really good in doing that. So we had like awesome trailers and excellent relationship with the platform owners. And whenever we released a game, there was a lot of featuring and we had a lot of downloads. And that was still our business model, even for free games. Right. And then that clashed with the culture of Rovio. When you're winning and you're #1, it's very hard to change. And people at Rovio, they didn't want, actually. Some people, I would say even many people, didn't want to make free-to-play games back then. It was not in Rovio's DNA. And I remember when I joined the Stockholm studio a few years ago, that studio was a studio formed by a lot of people who came from console developers, like from DICE, from Avalanche. And the idea and the promise that was given to them was, we are going to make premium AAA games for mobile. We're going to disrupt the mobile market, offering on mobile what you guys know how to do on other platforms. And eventually we realized that that's not going to work. The ground was taken beneath our feet, and we needed to move to free-to-play. And as we did that, and when I got to Stockholm that year, most people had left, actually. 58% of the studio had quit that year. Imagine that, 58%. Almost all the artists left. So it was not very easy for Rovio. It was a quite painful transition. And then, boom, the difficult days arrived, right? Suddenly, premium games were not as profitable as before, and we were still not very good in making free-to-play games. So, unfortunately, some of our colleagues had to go and leave the company. And 2015 and 2016 were really low points for Rovio. I remember that when I offered my resignation letter in 2015 to my former employer, that same day, a few hours later, there were news that Rovio was letting people go, like massive layoffs. So I can imagine how hard it was. I remember when I joined there, I was shocked that all the finance people quit. Everybody from the finance department quit. So what do you do when you see something like that? I don't know. It was scary. So, but what we took away from that, first of all, is that there is no try, right? If you're going to do free-to-play, you have to go all the way in. You can't stop in the middle and say, we're going to compromise here, we're going to do something around that. No, we decided that we were going to be a completely free-to-play company, and we fully embraced that model, and we made it very clear to everybody in the company that from that point onwards, we were only going to make free-to-play games, nothing else, right? And we learned that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. What that means is, first of all, we had to learn how to make UA profitably. We were super slow in doing that. And that changed completely our mindset. We never rushed to get a game out anymore, and we stopped having crunches, if any, because you needed to have the stamina to continue working in your game after the game was out, right? And we also accepted that maybe the game is not going to be as good as it can be in the beginning, but we'll keep working on it after it's released and try to make it get to the place we think it deserves to be. Maybe even more importantly, we learned that we don't need to do everything by ourselves. So many of those other enterprises that we had inside Rovio, such as the animation, and even the movie department, we still wanted to do those activities, but we didn't need to do them in-house, right? The price that we had to pay to do that and also to learn how to do it was way too high, just not worth it, right? So we decided to streamline our operations, and we still do a lot of these consumer products, but we're much smarter the way we do it. We license our brand, and we make sure that we have the right partners in doing so, but we don't do this in-house anymore. It's not worth it. What we did was we decided to focus on what we do best, right? And what was interesting on all of that is that the games business unit, even though the premium games declined and we went to some hardship, that department of the companies always grew in terms of revenue, right? And so we decided that we wanted to focus more on that. And that was a very big lesson for us, because that allowed us to focus our energy and grow our business much faster. So we set those targets for 2016. But we dreamed to get there. We ended up there. That was a result of focusing and in doing one thing and doing one thing right. And 2017, we had record-breaking revenues. Was the best year ever for Rovio. Even though we're not the #1 mobile company anymore, we made more money last year than we have ever made before. But we also learned that we can't stop investing in our future anymore, right? We don't want to be in the same situation where the ground is taken away from us again. So we reserve a part of our energy to try initiatives that we believe are going to be like hot or important in the future. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but we just released a game a few weeks ago in a association with Magic Leap. So now you can play Angry Birds using a mixed reality device. And the experience is actually excellent. Was well received by everybody who had the chance to experiment that. Does it mean that this is what we're going to do in the future? Who knows? But if this becomes the future, we are there. We have started working on this direction already. We won't be caught with our pants down. So, number 3. I'm going too fast, so I'm going to speak slower. This graph is the release, it's the revenue and the DAU graph of Angry Birds 2 when it was released. So what's interesting is if you, oh, I have a laser. If you look at the DAU curve, this is very much like a premium game release. You have a huge impact of the platform owners with a lot of featuring. We invested a lot. We had a beautiful trailer, quite expensive to make. And we attract a lot of attention to the game, and quickly this attention went away. And the revenue was following the same pattern. Some new featuring here, but still a very clear decline trend. And it was super hard to make Angry Birds 2. It was the continuation of our biggest game. We had a lot of fans. And the core mechanics of the games were well known. It's very hard to change that. And that's why people liked the game anyways. But Angry Birds 1 was a premium game. How the hell could we transform that into a free-to-play? Right? And we went halfway only. And the success that we reached was quite limited, actually. One of the maybe biggest mistakes that we made was we were heavily inspired by what was successful back then. So like everybody around that time were inspired by maybe Clash of Clans, but also and mainly by Candy Crush. And the progression system in Candy Crush is a saga map. So we definitely needed to have a saga map. And the way that Candy Crush monetizes is through continues. So if you run out of moves inside a match, then you play a little bit to continue playing. Or if you run out of energy, you want to continue playing, then you pay a little bit, you can continue playing as well. And that's what we did in Angry Birds 2. And that didn't work very well. So the saga map had many issues. The levels, they become a little bit repetitive over time. So the feeling of progression is quite slow. And it's a content treadmill. So we create new awesome levels, and we add those levels at the end. So now it's level 2000 and something. And a handful of players will ever be able to see this content that it's so hard for us to create. We spend so much time creating these maps, and almost nobody is able to see them. And this only gets worse over time. Right? So a lot of people creating content that nobody was going to play, or almost anybody. And we couldn't get rid of it. So we ended up with a free-to-play game with a premium soul. We were not fully there yet. So we took a step back and started thinking, what is special about this game? Right? What makes this game different than others? And first of all, of course, we have the birds, right? And we were not fully using them as we could. So the team had this idea or this mantra that they wanted Angry Birds 2 to be like a puppy to their players. In a sense that, I mean, a puppy is much more than a toy. Your emotional connection that you have with it is much stronger. So you think about it, even when you're not playing with your puppy, or you talk about your puppy with your friends, right? So it's much stronger than just this toy that you have here. Then that was our goal. That was the team's goal, to make that transformation. So in order to do that, the first step was to get the players away from the Saga map. So we needed new challenges for the players. And the first introduction, the feature that we introduced, or game mode that we introduced, that made a difference was the arena mode, which is a multiplayer feature. So you play your levels competing against another player who is playing the same levels as well. And whoever scores higher wins. And that was okay, but it didn't really achieve the results we were looking for until we introduced this feature here, the winning streak. So the more consecutive wins you have, the bigger the reward you receive, right? And that really made a difference to the game. Then we were happy with the results, and we decided to add yet another game mode. We called it the Daily Challenge. So, and that solved many issues. So every day, when you enter Angry Birds 2, you're going to find a different set of levels, and you have to win all 3 levels to be able to win a prize. The caveat here is that if you win the first level, you move to the second, but if you lose, then you go back to the beginning. So if you're already here on the 3rd level, and you lose it, you go back to the beginning again. You can try as much as you want within that day. If you don't win, that's a challenge in that day, then a new challenge is offered tomorrow to you. What this does is, and bear in mind, there is an increase in difficulty as well. Level 2 is harder than level 1, level 3 even harder, right? But what it did is, first of all, it allowed us to display here in rotation those levels that we were creating, those new levels that were awesome and nobody were seeing them. So we could feature them here. And secondly, we gave a different cadence to the game. Because when you have a Saga map, your progression is always a little bit linear. Of course, you still have those gates and like 20 levels, but it's still mid to long term. It's something that normally is going to take you a few days to achieve. And this one was very short term. So you had a goal for today, something to do now, very clear, right? So to make it even more interesting, we introduced yet another feature. If you win the 3rd level in the daily challenge, then you're presented to the new challenge. And that's completely different. I mean, it's way, way harder. The King Pig Panic is a set of super hard levels, and you only have one chance to complete it. Right? If you fail, then you have to do all over again. Win the daily challenge tomorrow to enable this game mode again. So that, imagine when, after all the effort that you've made to win the daily challenge, enable this mode to appear today, and you are already on the 4th or 5th level, and then you're about to lose. So what do? You don't lose. You do whatever you can to win. And that's what we saw happening. But that was not enough. We also needed to offer, we offer new reasons for the players to play the game and new things for them to do, but we needed to offer them also new content because we wanted them to spend resources on those content as well. So the tricky part here is because of the nature of Angry Birds, which is a very, how can I say, arcade-like game. So it's about destruction, it's fast-paced, and it's highly skill-based. It's a quite difficult game, actually, even though it's casual. So if we introduce power to the bird, say it that now if you upgrade red, it's more powerful and it's going to make more damage, then it becomes pay to win immediately, and also boring, because if it's not powerful enough and it's not going to break the obstacles, just bounce back, then it's not fun at all. You lose the fun of the game. So how do you introduce this concept of power progression without making the game pay to win? So what we did was introduce those cards that give you a multiplier for the score. And we made your score the gate to progress. So that's the gate to win a level. That's the gate to define your score against your competitor, against other player. And the more you upgrade your frame, the higher is your score multiplier. And we did the same with the hats. We introduced those hats, and they also multiply your score. So we had a lot of features like that. And still, there is something that was missing. Was a feature that allowed the players to spend more gems in the game and to drain the gem economy in the game. And we released this that we call the Tower of Fortune, which is a set of levels up to 100 or 99. And every level, you randomly select a card, and one of those cards is a pig. The 3 are rewards. If you get a reward, then it's yours, and then you can stop playing. Or if you get a pig, you lose, and you can start playing again tomorrow. The higher you go into the tower, the higher is the reward that each card has. Right. But you've seen that I've accumulated these rewards here already, and I can exit. I'm a level 30 already. I can exit any time. But if I continue and I lose, everything that I accumulated is lost. Right. And that played a lot with the players' aversion to lose what they had. So the result is this. We managed to, after all those changes in the game, we managed to stabilize the decline in the AU, even keep increasing it. Nowadays, it's even higher than that. But as you can see, the amount of revenue, the IAP revenue that we make, even with the same DAU base level, is much higher. So our ARPDAU increased a lot doing this. This, by the way, that was the release of the Tower of Fortune. Last year, we managed to get Angry Birds 2 into top grossing, 25 position in the US and iPhone. We were quite happy with that. There was a celebration. And what we learned from that? First of all, loss aversion is king. I don't know, I was trying to avoid saying that, but I was wondering if you guys noticed it. Every feature that we introduced, like the daily challenge, the winning streak, the Tower of Fortune, they rely in loss aversion. So that's a very good trick. Always work, actually. If you give something to the players and let them believe they already have it, make the rules very clear, you can lose it. And if they believe they did something wrong and they're going to lose everything that they got, then they will spend money in your game to keep what they think belongs to them already. So this is an example of the engagement after we introduced the loss aversion feature in the multiplayer, the winning streak, right? This is how much more the players started playing the feature just because of that. It's not that they started spending more necessarily, but they actually enjoyed playing that feature much more because of that. So the other takeaway, and that's something that really take to heart, is I don't think any of us need to play by the same rules as everybody else, right? That's not because Candy Crush was the role model back then that we should have just copied them. So, and that's something that I advise you always to think about. It's always ideal, I think, to find inspiration inside your own game, what really matters to your players, and try to find features that can work, not necessarily just copy what's out there. So what we did now in Angry Birds 2, when you start the game, before you would jump immediately into the Saga map, and that was pretty much the only game mode that was available. And now you can see that you jump into a menu where you actually see your birds. This is the first thing that you see when you come back to the game. And you can see also that you have the option to play the Saga map. It's one of the game modes, but there are many other game modes available to you as well. So the Saga map is just one way, one thing that you can do, but there are more. But this also was super important because that put the birds in front of everything, which is what we believe the most important aspect of the game is the characters. So now you see them, and you see what birds you still don't have, and you have desire to unlock them. And we recently, earlier this year, we made a change that instead of setting a specific order where you should unlock your birds, we actually now make this an option to the players. They can choose which birds they want to unlock, first and second and third. And that was important because people have favorites. So some people love Terrence, for instance. It's my favorite, for instance. And I'd rather unlock him before anybody else. Right? And that feature in itself, only doing that change, increased our retention, early game and late game retention, which is something super hard to do, mind you. You don't normally increase retention in a game, and that managed to do so. Right? So I spoke too fast. So I have a fourth section that I was preparing in case I was speaking too fast. So I will go through them. So you didn't see this slide here. Move on. That's me cheating. Sorry for that. I hope it's not too boring. I'm not a stand-up comedian, so I'm doing my best. I want to talk a little bit about our publishing models that we had. That's actually a very boring subject, unless you are a developer and you do code development. So bear with me for a while. I want to explain 4 different business models that we explained and why they failed. Right? Number 1 was just work for hire. So we gave some money to developers to make games for us. And that was okay back in the days in the premium, okay-ish, I would say, but didn't really work. The main issue there is that the developer, they will receive their money regardless of the game success or not. So their commitment to succeeding in making the game successful is not really there, economically speaking, right? So it was not very good for us. So what we decided to do is we decided to do co-development, meaning that we sponsor the development of the game, but we gave the developers a rev share, right? It means that every money that we spent developing the game in advance was later on taken back to our share as the game made profit. So the development was an advanced fee, right? Development cost. The issue there is it's super hard for the developers to survive with the rev share, particularly when you are deducting the advancement payments that you've made during development. So that you end up with many months, actually, as a developer, without any revenue, and you can't really survive that way. Right? So we covered one side, so we had the developers really committed because their success would come from that, and that was not capped. So if the game was a huge hit, it would be huge for the developers as well. But along the way, we set an impossible path for them because they wouldn't be able to survive. So what we decided to do was, okay, then we will do the live ops or the co-development. We give the rev share, but we will give the developers a fee. We call it the live ops fee as the game goes live. So the game is out, and we start deducting back the money that we invested in development. So it takes from the developer's rev share as well. But we keep giving some financial support to the developer for forever, really, so that we make sure that they have the resources to run the game and operate the game properly. So the issue with that is that we come back to the second attempt, where then the developers had the rev share, or this live ops fee, regardless of the game's success or not. And then we started to be in trouble ourselves, because we were investing more and more in the game, and the developer didn't need to be committed to see a financial result out of the game. So then we were back to the beginning. So what we decided to do is, okay, then let's make this live ops fee time limited. So we agree, we make a projection of how much money we think the game's going to make, when the game's going to be profitable for the developer, and when we think the developer will have enough money to live out of this rev share. And with that, we set the time frame saying in X months, we're going to stop the live ops fee, and you need to be profitable by then, living out of the rev share. So this was the best one that worked so far, but there are limitations as well, because it's hard to predict when exactly the game is going to be profitable. So we might still end up in the same situation. So we tried a lot of different approaches, and the one that we haven't tried yet, which is something that we are considering now, and that's my takeaway, is that we're still experimenting. What we are really considering doing now is actually second party development, meaning we make an investment maybe in the company, not necessarily in the game, and we acquire a little bit of parts of the company, and the company, the developer, uses those funds to develop the game, and we make an agreement upfront. If the game is successful, then we have the interest to buy the whole company, and we agree on that in the beginning. And if there is a common agreement there, then, and the game being successful, fine, then this company becomes part of Rovio, ideally. And so we don't need to worry about rev share, and everything is inside the same family. So it's very easy to do so. And if the game is not successful, then okay, we tried, then we move on, and maybe we try again. So that's the last thing that I can think of in terms of business deal models. Good. So I talked as much as I could. I hope I kept you as busy and entertained as I could. Just saying, we are hiring. We have a lot of positions open in case you guys want to apply. Thank you.
So you know the rules. Raise a hand if you have a question. Good.
Yes, thank you. You say about you create 51 game projects, and you create Angry Birds. Mm-hmm. And after that, you create another Angry Bird, another with some different game mechanics. Mm-hmm. Do you create something new, a game with new idol? Do you spend money to create something new, another, apart from Angry Bird?
Mm. Yeah, so the question is Rovio only focused in making Angry Birds games, right? And the answer is no. So the last non-Angry Birds game we released was Battle Bay. It's a completely different IP. It looks a bit like World of Tanks, mind you, just saying. It's a 5 versus 5 team-based PvP, synchronous PvP battler, and completely different characters. It's not the birds, it's completely new IP, and it's a game that we're supporting right now. We have other games in development as well that don't use the IP. So our mindset towards the IP is, it's ours, it's our IP, we need to take care of it, we need to foment it, invest in it, because nobody else is going to do it. So we will not forsake or let our IP go. We will keep investing on it, but we would not only invest on it. So strategy towards the Angry Birds IP now is we only make Angry Birds games that we think will make the IP stronger, that will add to the IP universe, that makes sense with the core features and the mechanics of the game as well. Otherwise, we would not do it. We would not use the IP just to lower the CPIs. That's something we did in the past, and it's not worth it. We're not going to do it anymore. Also, we had a lot of games that were using the same core mechanics or very similar core mechanics back in the days, a lot of slingshot games. I don't know if you noticed, but we strongly reduced or greatly reduced the cadence of slingshot games that we release because we don't think there is a need in the market to have several slingshot games released close to each other. So the answer is that we do more. We have other projects in development that are not just Angry Birds. Some of them released, some of them will be released. And we're super criterious in the way that we use the brain nowadays.
Thank you. More questions?
Hi. You mentioned loss aversion and all the success that it brought. I'm wondering what do you think about the hypothesis that IP brought that success as well alongside with the loss aversion effect? Because what if you didn't have such a successful IP? Can you imagine that loss aversion has similar effects? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this question. I think it does, actually. The IP, it helps us in many things, right? I mean, it helps us to bring players to the game, and the IP is well-rounded, so it's enjoyable characters, which is, I mean, having a theme in the game that's well done is super difficult to do, and that's done because we're using the IP. But remember, when we originally released that game, using the IP, it was not very successful. And it became successful after we started introducing those features. And the core, let's say, mantra behind those features is loss aversion. So with that, I can confidently say that this can work in any game, really. Even the most casual game, it still works.
How did you manage to change your company DNA to fit into free-to-play market?
Very painfully. So the question is, how did we manage to change the company to fit into free-to-play? There was a lot of discussions, many meetings, a lot of all-hands meetings where we openly talked about it. We made an effort to hire people who had experience with free-to-play as well. So not many people back then had that experience in-house. We made a very bold move. We changed our approach to user acquisition. That was key and necessary. Took us a long time to become good, but we brought one person who was expert in the subject, and he helped us a lot. So driving a change like that, like changing the DNA of a company, is not always possible. It takes a lot of energy. And it only happened because the top management was fully on board with that. And they gave us this directive. This is the path that we need to follow. And after a while, there was no more debate. This is what we're going to do. And we understand if anybody doesn't want to do that, it's regrettable, but that's the decision. And after we made it super clear, then the change started to happen. There was a lot of follow-up meetings as well. So we changed the process to approve games. So it became a bit more tighter in the beginning, with like stage gates where early on in the beginning, the team needed to prove that the game had some roots in free-to-play, and that made sense. So they had to think about the business from the get-go, to be honest. And so we had checkpoints where we could follow up on those. So we made sure that the decision of being free-to-play was carried on in all levels for a long time.